It's really great to see everybody, and I'm really delighted. I'm Carla Kaplan, Director of the Humanities Center, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to welcome you here on this unusually hot night, where we're sitting in the historic shadow, as many of you know, of the old Boston literary salons. They were just down the street at the Parker House and the Old Corner Bookstore. Salons that were made famous for the lively social debates of white men with 3 New England names. John Greenleaf Whittier, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Henry David Thoreau, James Russell Lowell, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jean Louis Agassiz, he really was one of them, William Dean Howells, Charles Eliot Norton, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and so on. Now, of course, the homogeneity of their less than public sphere was undercut by the history on which they literally stood. The Old Corner Bookstore was built on the site of Anne Hutchinson's wooden home. The Parker House not only housed the Saturday Club, but it later would employ not only Ho Chi Minh as a cook, but Malcolm X as a busboy. Everybody can still hear me okay? All right.
Malcolm X got your attention.
Yeah, I know. It's almost a hard image to wrap your mind around, but that's Boston, right? I think of our public sphere here tonight, as I look around this room, as a place that really honors that layered and that complex diversity. And it's to that kind of diversity and all of its surprises that tonight we're seeking to add another layer. Founded this past fall on the belief that what we need to do is marshal all of our interpretive resources in the widest possible forms of interdisciplinary exchange, the aim of the Humanities Center was to offer the region a conversation-based rather than a lecture-based model of dialogue and collaboration. So I hope you're in your most active mood. We're especially proud to partner with Conversations at 34 in bringing together tonight politicians and writers, philosophers and scientists, historians and healthcare providers, journalists and entrepreneurs, artists and lawyers, researchers and practitioners, and others. This is a rare night indeed. I would like to introduce you all to the president of Northeastern University, who will welcome you, Josephine.
Thank you. Can you hear me in the back also, like Carla? Let me, first of all, welcome you all on behalf of my wife Zaina and myself. Let me also mention that we have a very distinguished panel here, but some are very demanding. Skip Gates is asking to spend the night here and to have a very specific menu in the morning.
Hey, it's a nice house.
So I think that the contract is going too far. Because we have to rethink the format.
After this.
Let me introduce our provost. Where is our provost? Where is he? Our new provost director, Steve Director, and his wife Lori. The reason I'm focusing on the provost is that he is the one who's really shepherding the effort that Carla is working on with the Dean of Arts and Sciences, Bruce Strunken. And Bruce must be somewhere. He's here.
He must.
So we want to thank you for doing that. Very briefly, this is something that we wanted to do, not because only Carla decided that we should do it and no one can say no to Carla, but because it fits in the strategy of this university. We are very interested in building a different model in terms of approaching our scholarship, indeed in terms of approaching also our education. And we have the fortune or the privilege or the good fortune of not having built silos, because in many ways the university is a very young university. Very young in terms of moving into domains of scholarships and research that, and frankly, you can take it back to maybe 40 years only, which is a good point for us because we were able to innovate, we are able now to innovate and look at it, as Anne-Marie just said, sometimes it helps not to have a set model. And that's why we are here today. We're not interested in a set model. We're much more interested in building our own model, and this is why the center is of great interest to us. The center is going to bring us together. This is the first time that we're doing it here at the residence. We hope to do it again. But also stay tuned because Carla has views that transcend Boston. And we need to propose that. So once again, thank you for being with us, and no promises about breakfast.
Okay.
So let me just do a couple more things by way of introduction. How is it in the library? Would people prefer that I stand?
Yes.
Yes. Good answer. Thanks, Debbie. Okay, I'm going to stand. Let me do a couple more things by way of introduction and say a couple words, more than a couple, but about our topic this evening. For this inaugural event, and as the president told you, this is our first event, it would no doubt have been safer. Some might have even said it would have been more seemly for me to pick a topic about which I actually know something. Maybe even a topic where I have some command of the basic working vocabulary. But that kind of comfort actually wasn't exactly our idea. In fact, what we wanted to pursue instead were the pleasures that come from engaging one another just outside our intellectual comfort zones. To talk about those things that affect us all, but that which seem to us are so large or complex that we cannot grasp them alone, that for many of us seem so large or complex or technical or difficult that we're not even sure how to frame the questions. And DNA and genetics and identity certainly fit into this rubric of something that affects us all, but that may seem really large to us. It certainly affects us all. Whether we think about it affecting us in terms of our genetic tendencies, and everybody's been reading in the newspaper how we can increasingly learn horrible things. We can learn about our inherited diseases, what we're likely to get, our likely bad reactions to certain drugs, the chances that we'll get fat, whether we'll lose our hair, whether we'll suffer bone loss, lose our memories, wind up crabby and difficult, more crabby and difficult in my case. We know we are in fact affected beyond those things in ways so large that we really need to rethink now our very conceptions of things like citizenship, community, personality, privacy, inheritance, and difference. Things that are hard questions to ask. As Richard Lewontin wrote, there is no aspect of our lives, it seems, that is not within the territory claimed by the power of DNA, so how do we come together to talk about it? We're not here tonight to be for or against it. It's not very helpful. If there was ever a moment, that moment has long passed. If we ever wondered whether the moment has long passed, let me tell you that in June, Boston hosts the first ever personal consumer genetics show, just like a car show or a boat show. It's at the Heinz Convention Center. I do not have registration information. But we live in a moment in which we're facing questions that affect us all, in which we don't want to just be consumers. We don't want to find ourselves consuming this new future and feeling like it's something that happened to us. Evelyn Fox Keller talks about something she calls the transformation of our expectations. And I thought it would be nice to come together to try to frame questions that let us feel we have some agency in that transformation of our expectations, rather than come to feel this all happened to us and we weren't even sure what to ask. To help us ask questions, we've brought together this extraordinary and unusually eminent panel. It's very rare, as you know, for people of such accomplishment and eminence to join together in a panel of this interdisciplinary nature, people from social, historical, medical, cultural, and legal fields. I'm not going to do long introductions to the panelists. You've received them on your invitations. You've received them on the web. You know you can click on the web and receive further information on the panelists. And because you have this right in front of you, I think tonight we will dispense with the long introductions, if that's okay with everybody. But let me just say a word about format. With one exception, we're going to proceed in alphabetical order. Actually, it may be alphabetical order. I've asked Skip to speak first, and then we'll follow the order that's on your programs. And I've asked the panelists to just talk for 5 to 7 minutes and frame questions from their perspectives. Where the controversies lie, what questions have been overlooked, what questions they most think should be coming up at this point, what questions are part of the unfolding. And after that, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask questions. And I'm going to ask you to ask questions that open up the conversation in the broadest possible way, that take advantage of this extraordinary moment of this extraordinarily eminent panel to ask real questions. So I'm going to be really my worst Carla. I'm not going to let you ask pseudo questions that are a chance to describe your books. I'm not going to let you do that. You have to ask a real question. I'm going to encourage you, and all you academics who are giggling, you know, and some of you know me, and you know I mean it when I say I'm not going to let you do it. As my husband who's here would say, she can't help being bossy. It's in her DNA. And I'm going to ask you to ask questions that address as many of the panelists as possible. We're not here to debate one another and create a sort of performance. We're here to talk with you. Please try to draw people out. Your questions can also be questions for the entire room. They need not be addressed just to the panel. So that's how we'll proceed this evening. I do need to conclude on a less bossy and I hope more gracious note with just a few thank yous. I first want to thank all of you for joining us in this unusual experiment. I want to thank this extraordinary panel for joining with us in this experiment. This is a very unusual panel, and every person on it has somewhere else they could be tonight. In fact, every person on it has 3 other places they are supposed to be tonight, and I thank you so much for choosing to be here instead. I want to thank Northeastern for its support, the Provost's Office for funding. Thank you, Steve. The college, Deans James Steller and now Bruce Ronkin, for underwriting not just our programming, but our vision of a conversation-based model and what that means. My Associate Director, Amilcar Barreto, and my extraordinary staff, Jen and Nikisha, where's Nikisha, who are right there. And finally, and most especially, I want to thank the Owens for being exemplary, intellectual, and civic as well as administrative leaders, for sharing their vision about the importance of our asking the really big questions, the difficult questions, the questions that are least likely to produce immediate or tangible results, but are the most important questions to ask if we are ever to know why what we're doing matters. The questions, if Anne Fausto Sterling doesn't mind my quoting her, to ask old questions in new ways. For supporting the hunch that Boston could use yet another but an innovative model of intellectual exchange, and I thank them both, of course, for opening their very special residence to this very special evening. So thank you.